Hey everyone, I'm art prof teaching artist Deepti Menon, and I'm joined here with fellow art prof teaching artist Alex Rowe and Prof Lieu. Welcome everybody. Today we are doing a stream on meeting your art deadlines. If you're looking to strengthen and flex your art muscle, Art Prof is the community for you. We have tutorials, critiques, and more, and they are all for free. So Clara, I'm gonna toss this question to you. Why do you think meeting deadlines, especially for artists, is such a hard thing for us to do?
I think a lot of it is just being an artist is really unpredictable. You never know how your painting's going to turn out. You don't know if, oh no, that gesso that I prepared, it didn't work out so well. Now I got to prepare a new one. The lack of predictability, I think, is enough to drive anybody nuts as an artist and to deal with deadlines. What about you, Alex? What do you think is so specific about deadlines for artists that is so challenging?
Whenever I talk with other creatives about it, we all universally agree it's that weird period of inspiration, and how it comes and when it comes, where we all say it's very hard to plan for. So that thing of, oh, gee, I really hope I get an idea before this is due. And yeah, I'm really curious about that effect on other artists. So yeah, mention in the chat if you have other ideas of what you think causes deadline lapses for creative thinking.
And Deepti, we're looking at what was a pretty sticky situation for you freshman year in my class. Can you tell us what happened with this project?
Yes, so this was one of the projects I did in Clara's freshman class when I was one of her students. And I remember it was like mid-semester, I think. So all my other projects were piling on and I was getting a little lazy and a little tired. And it was a project that really I whipped out the night before it was due. I had not started. I hadn't done a thumbnail. I hadn't done anything. And the premise was to draw an indoor scene at nighttime or a nighttime just scene of any sort. And I picked the most basic thing that I had access to, and there really wasn't much thought put into it. And I just cranked it out, and it was a piece that I was not proud of whatsoever. The composition, I have so many issues with it, and it was reflected in the critique, and I knew that was going to happen. And what I learned through this process was that I did not have to procrastinate that long to get started on it. I could have done thumbnails. It was very avoidable. I could have done small incremental chunks of work to accomplish this and be prouder of it and have a piece that I actually enjoyed and felt proud of. But the fact that the deadline just snuck up on me was one of the reasons that I was in this sticky situation of having this kind of embarrassing piece. But I learned a lot from it, and I never had that issue again.
And you did meet the deadline. Granted, you weren't happy with the quality, but you did get it done. And that does count for something. And Alex, I know that you were not somebody who missed deadlines as a student, because I remember having you as a student and you passed everything in. But I know the way you went about it was not always so pleasant. Do you want to tell us about some of those experiences? This is from when you were at RISD, this image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this was like early in my sophomore year I did this one, but I think the problem that honestly stunted my growth in an art learning environment was that I was so focused on that finish line of that deadline, and I didn't care about pulling all-nighters or spending all day on it. And then the second I would go in, turn it in my brain, I'd be like, sweet, it's done. I did it. And then I'd just be exhausted and I wouldn't ingest the critique of how to improve. So week after week, I would keep making the same mistakes, both in planning and in execution.
I do think that this is one of those lessons you really sort of do have to learn it the hard way. I don't really know anybody who did not learn it the hard way. You have to have a scenario where you're so close and it was so unpleasant, and then you realize, you know what, I never want to do that again. Like Deepti, you probably never did that again with that charcoal drawing, right?
No, it was awful. And it was an awful feeling presenting that work to people in my class and to you, Clara. But I do think about like what you were just saying about you have to go through it to learn it. You also have to go through it to learn how you work as an artist. Because Alex, you said that you like to pull all-nighters. I've never once in my life pulled an all-nighter because I know that I just can't do it. But that means that I have a different way of working. If I'm given a week and you're given a week, there's different ways of both of us approaching that, but it's a learning process. So I say that, when you're a student, these hiccups will happen and you will have these brushes with not death, but deadline death. But that'll teach you, okay, maybe I work better in a planning way. Or maybe for you, Alex, you're like, maybe what works best for me is when I do stay up all night. I mean, obviously not, but it's all a learning process.
Yeah, definitely not.
I like this comment from Dara, who says, also underestimating the amount of time that goes into something. Now, I think dealing with deadlines, it never ends. I mean, you are always constantly trying to stay on top of it. I'm the same way, but I do think it does get easier. Alex, are you better now about not staying up all night and doing crazy things?
This feels like a bad deadline support group in a way. It's like, yeah, I think I am better now. And something about what Dara's saying was really key for me is actually recording how long it took for me to make a painting, not just from start to finish, but how long did it take for me to do a thumbnail, including brainstorming ideas? How long did it take to do a color study? So that way, when I'm planning my schedule, I can accurately plan, like, okay, I know it takes me about 3 days to do this part, rather than what I would do in college, where it's like, oh, I want to do this. Like, I don't know, I think it'll take me 4 days, and just wing it. But now I can, even tell clients, like, all right, you'll get this on this day, this on this day, this on this day.
My thing about deadlines now is I still get stressed about them and they do drive me up the wall, but I never have a doubt if I'm going to fulfill it or not. Like, I know I will get it done, but the process of getting it done is oftentimes not that pleasant. Whereas I think when I was in school, I didn't have that confidence because I did not know myself very well as an artist. I didn't know the materials very well. I couldn't predict things. Now I really am familiar with my work process, and that's helped a lot. What about you, Deep? Did you ever take a deadline and you're like, I don't know if I can do it? Or are you pretty confident that you'll get it done now?
I think I'll never say yes to something that I have any fear that I won't accomplish it by the deadline. But again, that has a lot to do with, Clara, what you were saying about just feeling more confident in knowing myself as an artist, knowing what I can do in a given amount of time, and also understanding my medium and my materials and what a specific client might be looking for. And also having, it's different when you're in school because you're told something to do and you have to do it. But when you're working on client-based work, a lot of times you can have a conversation and say, like, I know you want this, but I can only get this, this, and this done by the deadline. So having some sort of negotiation and getting to a point where you feel comfortable. But yeah, feeling just more confident as an artist and in my medium has changed everything for me. So I think for everyone, as time progresses, you'll get so much better. And then as you get more confident too, things take less time. So even though you're maybe giving yourself the same amount of time, it might actually be quicker. And that's awesome.
And let's be clear that missing a deadline in school is really different than missing one for a client or in a professional situation. For example, what's the difference, Alex, between deadlines in school and a professional one?
I think the best way to put it is that school, deep down, even the most hardcore professors, like, everybody knows it's that learning environment. Like, it's not, unless you come off as super flaky and disrespectful, there is, I think, that leniency of like, oh, you're also learning how to manage your time. Whereas in a professional environment, there's a lot on the line, not just your time and your income, but whoever's hiring you is on their own deadline. Like, for example, with book work, there's the publication deadline to work on, which so many people are tied into. And if you drop the ball on big things, then yeah, that's a reason to not hire you again. And it's one of those things where if it stresses you out, then good, because it should be very stressful. And that's that kind of wake up that's needed.
And it's a big deal to miss a deadline. Let's say, Deepti, I asked you to do something and you just showed up and said, I don't have it. And you didn't say anything to me. No heads up or anything. I would be like, bye-bye. I would never hire you again. And so literally you can lose gigs. And on top of that, guess what? I'm going to tell all my friends. I'm going to say, don't hire Deepti. She doesn't meet deadlines. I mean, that will get around. Thank goodness I have not had to do that yet.
It's not true, folks. Hire me, please.
There are consequences to that are pretty significant in the professional world. So let's actually take a look at a deadline that made me bats. Many years ago, this was in 2014, I agreed to do a solo exhibition at Simmons College. And usually for shows, you make the work and then you take it around and a gallery might express interest and then you have a show. This curator found me and said, I want to give you a show. I want it to be a solo show and I want it to be in a year. And I was like, oh, well, I'm in the middle of working on these drawings and they're not done yet, but I can have them done within a year. This was the worst deadline I have ever dealt with. Alex, why do you think, because a lot of people say, oh, a year, you got so much time, that's great. Like, why do you think this one drove me insane?
The scary thing about that is like the longest project I think I've dealt with was like a couple months. And even that was a nightmare to plan. The thought of dividing up a year, not just in the creation of work, but the exhibition of the work, I just don't even know where to begin. And yeah, like I'm curious if you knew where to begin. Like, how did that go?
It was really unpleasant to make the work because I couldn't focus on the process. I was so product oriented and thinking I have to have 14 paintings. They all have to be done by then. And the thing is, when you plan a solo show, it's not just the work. You have to talk to the curator. You have to have an essay written. You have to have an installation plan. You got to deal with framing. And that really was too long. I mean, I look back on it and I really honestly wish I had 3 months, not a year. And it was really, really hard to deal with. We have a question from Orange Cat who says, what about missing a deadline because of reasons outside of your control? I gave myself a week to finish a mural, but we had to set up for Christmas and my guinea pig ended up in my room. I know what that's like. So Deepti, what do you say about that? Because life happens, stuff will occur that's not in your control.
Well, one of my hot deadline tips is to always give yourself 2 deadlines, the actual deadline and one that's maybe a week earlier or a month earlier, depending on what the overall time span is. And have an accountability buddy hold you to that earlier fake deadline and try and make that deadline. Because always, life will throw you things at the worst time. There will be things happening in the world that will stress you out. There will be things happening with your family. Another project will come up. Always anticipate that. So always give yourself more time than expected. If you can set your own deadline, I like to ask for 3 times more time than I think that it'll take. If I think it'll take me a week to do something, I'm going to ask for 3. So always take the route of asking for more time. And if you can't get that, then give yourself a deadline that's earlier and try and meet that deadline. And ask for friends to hold you accountable. If you can, set up multiple mini deadlines throughout the entire span so that you're not procrastinating and you're holding yourself accountable and someone else is as well.
Or this is what I do. I just say no. If somebody asks me to do something and I look at my schedule and I go, that's a little tight, I will not take it because professionally, I can't risk doing a project that's going to make me insane. And if I miss it, that is the kiss of death as a professional. And I would much rather say no than risk not finishing a job. And let me ask you guys something. I actually asked some of my pre-college students because they have trouble with time management when I used to teach there. And I would say to them, how many of you guys did a project this summer that you thought it was going to take 4 hours and it took 2? Not a single person raised their hand. Why do you think that is, Alex? That we always think it's not going to take that long. It always takes another 2 hours.
I think a lot of it is because it's kind of what you started the stream with of you have those difficulties in understanding the media. How long does this gesso take to dry? How long does this take to set? But then you also have a general encouragement, I think, by our world for the artists to embrace that kind of creative freedom of the ideas come when they can. And we don't have that kind of regimented idea of no, like I'm a creative professional. I can produce these ideas. That's why I'm here. And I think actually, Clara, I hope you can remind me what stream we did where we were talking about how to deal with artist block. I think it was just that, discussing artist block, of how to work through those points and actually deliver the goods in time.
Well, the thing about deadlines is that, for example, this show that I did, it was a year, and I had a deadline for every 2 weeks. I said by mid-January, this will be done. By the end of March, this will be done. And so just because you have a deadline that's, say, in a month, it doesn't mean that you can't set deadlines within that deadline. Like, Deepti, have you ever done that where you've said, okay, by this week, thumbnails are done? Do you structure it that way ever?
Yeah, I am always setting mini deadlines within my larger deadline, because I think that if I just focus on the final, it's almost like doing thumbnail sketches. You know, you have to have a process to get you to the final, and it also makes things feel more digestible to be like, okay, in a week I'll do this, rather than like in 2 months I'm going to accomplish this huge feat. Seeing it in like smaller pieces, it makes it more digestible and makes me feel like I can actually accomplish that.
This is a good point from Dara, who says in response to Orange Cat, if it's a real reason, like you got hit by a car, people will generally be understanding. It also helps to build an extra time into whatever schedule you make. That is really true, because it's one thing to flake and just be like, I didn't get it done. But if you get hit by a car, nobody's going to penalize you for that. But the thing is, though, I definitely have worked with students who every week it was something else. And I remember I had students, I can always tell when they're lying. Like, I had this one student, they missed class. And I said, why weren't you in class? Oh, my mom had cancer. And I was like, really? I don't think that's something you talk about that flippantly. And I knew, based on their history of attendance, that this was something they were doing over and over and over again. Whereas if I have a student who's like always on top of it, always gets stuff done, and then all of a sudden something like that happens, I go, oh, okay, I understand, because you're normally so on top of it. So a lot of this is accountability. Don't you think, Alex, you're always sort of trying to prove that to people?
Yeah, and I think that's where what Deepti last said about having your own personal deadline before the real deadline really comes into play. Because if something tragic like that really does happen, then you would have already communicated with your client, sent them progress images, had lots of communication of images and deadlines, and best case scenario, you even have the project done before it's due. So from the hospital bed with your broken leg, you can say, here's the project, like, without working on it. But I think that's that thing where if it's all this veil of mystery and you're like, don't worry guys, I'll have it done, I'll send it to you on the deadline, and then genuine tragedy strikes, then you're up the creek without a paddle. Whereas if tragedy strikes and you can say to the client, hey, listen, I physically can't finish it, but you have all of the work I've done, here's another artist I know who can finish the last pieces, so we can make it work for the deadline.
Yeah, this comment from Suitainly it goes really well with what you were saying, Alex. It says, most clients aren't too disappointed if you communicate any delays early and with good reasons. And I think that's a good example of why you should also have progress deadlines throughout the entire process, because if you're showing your client a little bit of work every week and showing them that you are, opening communication and how much work you're getting done, I have this happen to me all the time where I need to ask for an extra week or something, but a lot of times actually the client will offer me extra time because they can see how much effort I'm putting in every week. And they'll be like, by the way, we actually don't need this until the end of the month. So if you want to take that time, go for it. We're really happy with where you're at. And it helps avoid any sort of hiccups at the end where you're like, oh gosh, please help. Just open communication. Most people are very reasonable if you're showing that you are doing what you've been asked to do.
I think the difference is when you don't give people any heads up. This is a very small example, but I had a phone call scheduled this morning, okay? And the person didn't call and I didn't have their phone number, so I couldn't do anything. Shot them an email, said, hey, what's going on? I think we're gonna have to reschedule. The person calls me 4 hours later. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, text me, send me a text that says, hey, I'm running late. Can we reschedule? If they had said that, I would have been like, fine, no problem. But the fact that they said nothing and then called me out of the blue, I was mad. And so a lot of this is how you actually go about doing it, because there are ways to get flexibility within reason. I mean, it also depends on who you're working with. Some people can't be flexible. Some people really can. You have to really think about that. Now, Alex, I know one experience you had after school was at the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators conference. And I know you were preparing a portfolio for that. And that was a deadline because you had to show up at the conference. So what was that process like?
It was more stressful the second time I went, because the first time it was very much like, I have my portfolio, I'm going to show what I got. Second time, I kind of had a concrete plan, and a little bit like your experience, Clara, I had a whole year to add extra work, as well as print and present and compile the portfolio. So it was a little hectic, especially since my work is mostly traditional, and the whole chaotic method of photographing and scanning and printing and getting them color accurate was very stressful. And a big example of, oh yeah, I could do that in a week. And that was not enough time. I really needed a lot more time to really test the colors and work with different printers. So that was a really big learning experience on a different element of it that I was not familiar with, that I assumed would be easy.
I mean, that makes me think of preparing an art school portfolio, because Deepti, when somebody's preparing a portfolio to apply to art school, they're thinking, oh, I got to make artwork. But what do you have to do to the artwork to send it to the school that everybody forgets about, Deepti?
So much stuff. You have to have a statement sometimes. You have to photograph it. You have to, then that's a whole process, lighting it, photographing it, then making sure it's the right dimensions, making sure it gets uploaded. I remember uploading and it wouldn't upload, and I was like, why? And so you have to resize. There's a whole process, and you've made the artwork, but now you have to send it to people, and that's a whole nother nightmare in and of itself.
I mean, that's like the exhibition I had. People might think, oh, just make the artwork. I'm like, no, I have to submit my statement to the curator so they can write the essay. We had to prepare the catalog. I had to get the work framed. I mean, framing is not something you can't do, like express framing. Like, you have to plan that stuff way in advance. ComCuke says, for disabled people, it's pretty hard when it's a chronic or severe disability. I find that abled people don't really understand having a problem that's chronic and unpredictable at all times. So what do you say about that, Alex? Because like we said before, sometimes things are flexible, some things are not. Everybody's in a different situation. Some things are ongoing. Sometimes things happen. So what would you say for that?
I think that's a really good one to have up front with your client, and also knowing, I think the first thing I think of is a time where, for my own mental health, I could not produce work and I could not meet deadlines. So for me, that was a time where I just simply couldn't accept work because I knew I couldn't. But then when I think of friends who have more like a physical disability rather than a mental that poses challenges to their work, it's more of just a communication of, I think it goes back to that of, hey, all right, I'll have these sketches to you by this date, even if that's a little later than the client is expecting. It's like, no, this is how I make my work. This is what I'm working with, and that's the deadline.
This is a good follow-up comment from Dogbit. I agree. I don't have a necessarily physical disability, but a mental illness one, and it does definitely affect me physically, seriously. Again, that's where the communication matters, because when I taught at RISD, I always said to the students the first day of class, listen, if there's anything in your life that you think could potentially impact your performance in this class, tell me. And it's confidential, I'm not going to tell anybody. And so I'd have students who'd come to me and say, listen, I have an anxiety issue. I want you to know about it. And then I get that heads up. So why does that make all the difference, Deepti?
I mean, it's just so that the client or you, Clara, aren't blindsided, I guess, by something coming up at the end. And so, because, on the day when you're expecting something, to have it not be there, and then to have someone tell you that there was an issue, that they had an issue come up, or whatever it is, even if it's a physical disability and anything, you have no way of helping them also at that point, but knowing it in advance, you're prepared to be a pillar of support and and be able to be, empathetic and reasonable. And so it's a two-way street, really. And you really want to make sure that there's open communication on both ends, and that, we're creative people. We're not like shooting rockets into space. This is like, a lot of times we're making things for, joy, and there's a positivity included in it. So it should be a positive experience for everyone. So have the client or the teacher be able to make that happen for you too.
Now, obviously, so much of the deadline is, I got to get the work done, and how do I set the deadlines and everything? But actually, I think one of the more compelling things that people don't talk about enough is breaks, and how those are so important to think about and plan in advance. Like, Alex, you have this quote, clock out strategy that actually I think I'm going to start using it now. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. My other art mentor from school told us this, where he was just saying, you have to have a period where ideally you can close your studio room door, lock it, and go cook dinner, go hang out with your family, go see a movie with your friends, and live your life. And that very fine line between you need to work on this an extra hour, the project's due tomorrow. It's like, no, I'm going to take a break because that's healthy, and then you don't get it done, versus you work hard. And the best way to sum it up is, when you're working, you're very diligent, you're very focused, you're not taking phone breaks, you're really going for it. So that way, when you take a break, you can also really clock out.
Because really, Deepti, the danger is burnout. And what is the problem with that if you're in the middle of a project?
If you're in the middle of the project and you're having burnout, you're really in a bad place, because burnout, for me at least, is physical and mental. And then I just can't get anything done. And I don't know when I'm going to have the energy once again. And you also have to know, this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, how you are as an artist. For myself, I know that when I am reaching to a point where I'm getting burnout, that's when my anxiety kicks in and it becomes like debilitating. And so I've had to go through that process to realize that, but knowing that, okay, if I push myself too far, I'm going to burn out and I'm going to have panic attacks. And so just being like, what's more productive is to take a weekend and send it off to the client and have them give me feedback or something, make it productive in a way. Send it off to someone so you have notes when you come back. But taking 2 days off is better than pushing yourself for those 2 days and then being unable to do anything for like a week. So know what works for you and know what will make the most sense long term.
I mean, I think you guys know I'm a total workaholic to the max, but I have to really watch it because I work so intensely and so much, and I love it. I mean, it's something that really sustains me. But if I don't really keep an eye on it, I can burn out so fast. And so I feel like a lot of my time management is to make sure I don't burn out. For example, a lot of the times during the day, I don't want to be disrupted. I want to just work. But the thing is, I actually have an alarm on my clock that says step outside. It's telling me to put my shoes on, walk around the block, come back, because I'm not joking. I was making YouTube thumbnails all day yesterday. It was so boring, but I was clicking so much that my arm hurt this morning. And I was like, Clara, you can't do that. That's really dumb.
We have a comment here from Maya Hika that says, I feel guilty taking breaks because it makes me anxious and makes me think I'm lazy and unproductive. And, I actually have this same issue when I take breaks. And what I've found that works for me is that I take a break by just doing something productive in a different facet of my life. Like, instead of working on my animation, I will go do the dishes, or I will even taking a nap because I'm knocked out and I can't be mad at myself, but doing something. And then when I take a nap, I can stay up a little bit later. So finding other ways to still be productive and feeling like you are checking things off your list might help you not. It works differently for everyone, but I read this comment and I was like, that's me. And what I found works very well is to just do something productive in a different area, because then when you return to your creative process, at least you're coming with fresh eyes and you've had a little bit of a breather. But Alex, do you have any tips for feeling guilty about taking breaks?
Yeah, and it was actually one of when we were all talking before the stream, it was the idea of Deepti said of like having checklist items like day by day that you can check off the list, like, oh, tangible steps that you can complete. And that helps me with my anxiety for taking breaks is, okay, I'll take my break this afternoon when I've done these 3 things. And when I've done those, then I can have a guilt-free break. Don't get me wrong, I couldn't just do this. It took a lot of time to practice and get myself to actually relax, but I could be like, okay, I had a good productive morning. I didn't spend it on my phone. I like genuinely focused. And yeah, I think that that's why when you're clocked in, you have to be really clocked in and diligent so that you can feel like it's an irrational part of your brain telling you you're not productive.
Now, how about projects, you guys, where you cannot change things and you start realizing into the project, like you did, Deepti, with this music animation video, yikes, this is not enough time and I'm going to be really stressed. Tell us about this project.
Well, this project, the clients I was working with, which is a band called Attaboy, were the kindest group of people. And we had really great communication throughout where I was giving them updates every week. So they saw the progress I was doing. But life happens and things happened in my life and my mental health wasn't doing great. And it just made it so that the amount of time that I had set to make this project, it just wasn't enough time. But like I said earlier, because I was showing my progress throughout and being openly communicative with the band about what was going on, they were more than happy to present me with more time. But again, this was one of those situations where in retrospect, I was like, I should have originally asked just for more time, knowing that life throws things at you. So this was a really good experience. But the other tip that I learned from this, which I actually did do, and you can see in these stills that I did, is I prioritized what was important for me in making this something that I was proud of. And I realized that having color and backgrounds were things that I was willing to do as like sprinkles on the top of the ice cream sundae. And for the backgrounds, I decided to keep them in pencil. And for a lot of the images, I actually didn't include backgrounds. And I still felt really proud of the piece because I, in the planning process, figured out really what was important and what I really needed to get done by the deadline. And if by some stroke of luck I had extra time, I would do these other things. But it's still a piece I'm really, really proud of. And I think having that open communication with the kindest clients I've ever worked for helped. But again, prioritize what's really important and know that that deadline's coming and constantly be assessing what you can be doing and communicating that.
And you know what, you guys, there's no shame in not doing 110%. It really is okay. I had a student a couple of years ago who was having a really hard time where they would just agonize over the project. Oh, it has to be the best thing I ever made. And they said they changed their mindset to say, you know what? B+ work is fine. It's enough. It will get the job done. Yeah, it's on an A+, but you don't have to do A+ work all the time. I hate that this comes from Facebook, but I read this in Sheryl Sandberg's book, and they have a poster at Facebook headquarters that says, done is better than perfect. And it's true. Your client probably doesn't know the difference with those little things. I mean, like, Alex, do you really hit it out of the park for every gig you make?
Well, honestly, I had that unhealthy idea all through college, and that became very destructive to my learning, where I was like, every project should be better than the last one. And that's not how it works. And it wasn't until long after college that a non-artist roommate was like, hey, Alex, like, you haven't started that painting you're working on. And I shared with him how I was really nervous about putting pen to paper. And he was like, just don't let perfect get in the way of great. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. And yeah, like, it's just, that was such a click in my brain.
WC says, right now I'm working on this project in collaboration with a writer, and because it's more of a passion project with no real deadline, I'm having trouble finishing it. Yes. So here's the thing. We're all complaining right now about how difficult deadlines are, and they continue to be for everybody, regardless of your experience. But sometimes deadlines are a good thing. Like when I got out of school and I was so used to like every week this is due, all of a sudden I didn't have any deadlines. And honestly, I found that very unnerving. I was like, and I couldn't get anything done. And so as much as deadlines do stress me out, I need them. Even if I have something that's not really set in stone, I still do it. Like somebody asked me to write an article a month ago. And I said, well, when do you need it? And they said, oh, it's fine whenever. And I said, no, give me a deadline. Like if you don't give me a deadline, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So Alex, does that ever help you to have a deadline? Is it sometimes positive?
Yeah, I really relate to that comment where, as far as the exciting personal projects I'm working on, I did not give myself a deadline yet, but I probably will after this stream because that's probably the reason they're not finished. It's because I'm like, oh, this is fun. I'll work on that. And here we are.
Maria says, any tips for meeting college portfolio deadlines? I have a deadline in 8 days and I'm super stressed. What would you recommend, Deepti?
I'm sorry you're stressed. I feel that stress. I remember that stress. I think you have 8 days, so just try and plan out what you can accomplish every single day. Try and give yourself mini deadlines. Don't think about it as you need to submit something in 8 days. Figure out how you can break that up. And just remember that, like we said, done is better than perfect. And you got this, and it's good. In a week, in a little bit over a week, your stress will be gone. So you got this.
You know what helps me? I have this playlist. I always listen to it when I need to like focus. There's something about there's like this one particular set of songs. Like when I hear it, it like triggers this mindset, and I go into like work mode. Whereas if I'm not trying to focus that much, I might listen to a podcast or, something that's maybe not so compelling. But sometimes there is this mood you have to set to be like, okay, let's just dig in. Because I definitely have had times when I've thought to myself, you can't screw around anymore, Clara. You got to get this done. I set alarms on my phone. Like sometimes I have work I don't want to do. Like, oh, I have to write this thing. And if I don't put it in my phone, write this thing at 3 o'clock, it's like 11 o'clock and I still haven't done it. So you have to like trick yourself into like doing stuff you really don't want to do. So I don't know. Do you have any tricks for that, Alex?
I mean, I'm bothered that all of my advice on how to meet deadlines is to like take breaks and like smell roses and stuff. But I mean, at the same time, a lot of my handling on this has come from my ability to like wake up, have coffee, like read a book and be like, cool, I'm going to work all day. And you give yourself this time where like, I'm not going to start working until 7:30. Like, and at 7:30 to noon, I'm going to work my butt off. But before 7:30, this is just me time. And you check your phone all you want. So that way you get it out of your system and then you can get to work.
Era is saying, I have midterm exams coming up. I need works to be done and also to review my exams. Any tips to get them done? I'm really anxious that I won't finish. Yeah, I mean, no matter who you are, we're all balancing so many things. I mean, for me, it's my kids who are doing remote learning right now. I cannot tell you how many times a day I get interrupted. The only time that they won't bother me is during streams because they know I will like murder them if they bother me during a stream. But it's constant interruptions. And so I find it really hard to get that continuity going. So there's always something else. Deepti, advice for that, because we're always juggling things like the stream, balancing your day job and your artwork.
Yeah, as a freelance artist, I'm balancing like 5 projects at any given time. But remember that like your client might give you one deadline or your midterm might be on one day, but what you accomplish from right now to that day is up to you to figure out. So you might be balancing a couple different things, but figure out how you can take small bites of both things at the same time. If it works for you when you're taking a break from one, work on the other. But just remember that it's a process and you really need to just sometimes hunker down and figure out what works for you, take breaks, but it's all about planning, and you might be planning by the hour, but do what works for you and just give yourself enough time to plan out and take breaks.
I want to give a shout out to Dreamy Lizard. Thank you so much for the super chat. We greatly appreciate when you guys contribute, because we rely entirely on donations. Our content is 100% free, and we want it to stay that way. So this really is a huge help, you guys. Casey is saying, do you have any tips for staying focused on work while working from home, especially now during COVID? I find myself distracted by family members and household chores. What would you recommend, Alex?
Actually, there was a customer who does like CPA work, and they are working from home now. And their advice was actually really good for artists too, where you still wake up, take a shower, like dress in work clothes. Like for them, they dress like they're going to the office, and they just sit on their couch and do their work. There's something about that mental power of getting into that mindset that can be really helpful. What about you, Deepti? Are there ways that you can that you personally like work through that?
I'm so bad at working at home. But Clara Lieu gave me this piece of advice when I first moved to New York, and I've said it on so many streams, but it really did.
It's so good.
It's so good. It's so good. But it was to mock a commute, because what I was used to before working from home was to have a commute. And so during the commute, it would kind of be like my pre-7:30 time, like you were talking about, Alex, where I'd read on the train or listen to music, but I didn't have that anymore. So I would go for a walk and get coffee. And then when I came back, I felt like I had that me time. I wasn't still in my pajamas. I got dressed. And then when I came back, I was focused. But dealing with family is definitely hard. I don't live with my family, but with my roommate, sometimes you just have to tell the other person, like, hey, I can't talk for an hour, or have them be a part of it. Be like, hey, can you check in on me in an hour and see if I've actually done these 3 or 4 things? Sometimes your family just wants to be involved and you're just ignoring them. So make them feel a part of it. I don't know. But I think the commute thing, I think just figuring out a routine and a rhythm that works for you. And it's all, guessing and trying different things. But Clara doesn't lie, so take her advice.
We got a comment from
Rowe.
Oh, this was it clicked with me where they were saying when I really need to focus, I always pull up a Daft Punk channel or video game music playlist. Something about the repetition helps my ADD brain focus. And for that one specifically, honestly, video game music, because when you think of how it's composed, it is to kind of keep you in that motion, and that it does really help me kind of flow into the flow very well. So I was going to ask you guys about what music or podcasts you are drawn to help you through those creative times.
Honestly, I would be the worst studio mate. I do this thing where I have a playlist of 3 songs and I listen to it for 6 hours. It's obnoxious. I don't know. There's something about, like, I don't have to listen, but I know I like it. It doesn't make any sense.
And then you like bang pots and pans together, or
That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life.
You've never done this? Like, I will put on one song and listen to it for 3 hours.
Oh my gosh, no. You know what I've been doing recently is I've been listening to murder podcasts, like crime podcasts, because I get so scared. I can't go to sleep. So I'm staying up, and it's like, I have to know how this person survived or was found. And next thing I know, it's like I finished the project and I'm still like, oh my gosh.
Speaking of podcasts, Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And in a little bit, Deepti and Alex will be hanging out in the Art Prof Discord. They will be in the post live streams channel, so go hang out there and talk about your quirky studio habits. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you guys want to continue to grow and develop as an artist. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters. You guys make it possible for us to keep Art Prof up and running and free and accessible to everybody. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. All your contributions help enrich our conversations here. We will see you guys next time. Bye.